Well, hello. Welcome to episode 6, series 4 of the Orchard podcast. In case, you're new, joining us afresh, I'm Rachel. This is Amy.
Hello.
And we're sisters. And you are so welcome on this little orchard journey. And just to say that we have got a conference coming up, and we would love to unapologetically encourage you fairly strongly to come along, quite honestly. So we're going to be holding our conference in Birmingham. We've got space for, I think, nearly 3,000 women this year in Birmingham. Exciting. Although last year and previous years it has sold out, so don't hang around. And that's going to be happening on the 5th of October. And then the following week, just a mere week later, we're going to be having the very first Orchard Conference in London. And we're going to be at St Paul's Hammersmith. So we've got about 700 spaces there. And that is already getting close. That's filling up. So that's going to be the following week, October the 12th. So if you haven't yet booked your ticket, get a wriggle on. We would love to see you there. We feel so excited about what God's put in our heart for that conference. We're going to be looking at Isaiah 61, Spirit Anointed.
Yes.
And we've got some various friends joining us, which we will reveal.
Don't forget to mention we have the youth.
Youth!
So we have youth coming alongside the Birmingham ICC. We have youth stream, we're calling it, Orchard Youth.
Orchard Youth.
So if you are listening and you have a youth, or you are a youth leader, please.
Or a youth yourself.
Or a youth yourself, exactly. Please have a look on the website. All the details are on there, and book your ticket.
Do you think we make the assumption that no youth listen to this because we have youth daughters
that would never listen to this?
That would never choose to listen to us because they have to listen to us all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So you never know. If you are a youth listening to this, let us know. We would love to hear from you. Anyway, so that's the conference. Super excited. That is coming up in October. So today we are...
You should have always been a BBC presenter.
That was quite... I don't know what that was.
You've always
Classic
wanted
FM,
to be a
Classic
BBC.
FM.
You've always wanted to be a presenter.
I did always.
You would be such a good presenter.
Oh, it's just too late now, isn't it?
Well,
never too late.
Yeah, probably.
Probably too late. It's too late. Who cares? I love what I do now, so it doesn't matter. But I did. My ambition was to be a Blue Peter presenter, and it never happened.
Yeah,
never happened. Yeah. Anyway,
well, look where you are.
But look what the Lord has done.
Exactly.
He is good. Anyway, we're going to be looking at Priscilla, but I did do quite like a radio. I feel slightly conspicuous because you're looking at me like you're such a loser.
No, I'm not. It's love in my eyes.
Yeah,
love
was
in
it
my
love
eyes.
or was it? Oh, bless her. She's sitting in a little room in Trinity Church, Nottingham, and she thinks she's presenting BBC Radio. Oh, it's so embarrassing. Anyway, we're going to be looking at Priscilla. Not Priscilla Shira, who's one of my favourite preachers. She's awesome, although I imagine this is her namesake. And so Priscilla appears in the New Testament. And we're going to I'm going to shut up. You give us some context, Amy.
No, it's very good. Context is we read about Priscilla 7 times, we have found, in the New Testament. We're going to run through the things a little bit of a context about her, and then we're going to go into these in a little bit more detail. That she's married to Aquila, Priscilla and Aquila. We hear...
Oh, Aquila, I've heard him...
Is it Aquila?
I don't know. Is it Aquila? Is it Aquila? We never know.
You got a Q-U?
Aquila sounds like he is Aquila.
Aquila,
I mean, if I were him, I'd go with Aquila.
Aquila. Priscilla and Aquila. It sounds good together.
It's got a ring to it.
And what we know context-wise is that when we hear about them, we learn that they have fled from Rome and they meet Paul in Corinth. They fled from Rome because they're Jewish, basically get chucked out. And we found out also that it's possible that Priscilla comes from a wealthy background, a wealthy Jewish family. Potentially. Anyway, as I said, they meet in Corinth, they meet Paul in Corinth, and we find out as well that they're all tent makers.
I know.
Well, yeah, maybe she wasn't a tent maker and Aquila was a tent maker. So she joined the tent making party.
She rolls up her sleeves, literally, doesn't she?
Exactly.
She gets involved.
But we'll go into that in a little bit, perhaps. And what we know is that they lived with them, didn't they? Do you want to carry on? They lived with...
Yeah, Paul I was
getting bored of my own voice. I was like, getting you.
Gosh, if you're bored of your voice. Oh, dear. I'm falling asleep listening to me. So, yes, what we know is that Paul then stays at their house. And people the general consensus is people think he lived there for like maybe a year and a half. So this wasn't like, a weekend with Priscilla and Aquila. He obviously was there for quite some time.
Yeah.
And clearly, therefore, they have sat under Paul's teaching. Yeah. And then they become missionaries with Paul. They go with Paul to Ephesus. It says he leaves them there and he goes off to Syria. So there's obviously good reason why.
Do you remember, Rachel?
Oh, go on.
Do you remember our trip to Ephesus with Mum and Dad?
I do.
And we were surly teenagers. Well, I certainly was a surly teenager.
You were a bit surlier than me,
being taken round the most incredible places. And there are just pictures of us looking incredibly bored.
I think I was more concerned about getting a suntan.
I know.
Yes.
It's very sad.
But do you know what was significant about that? Was it the same trip? Was it the year that Princess Diana died?
Yes, it was.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But it was like we went. I say to my husband sometimes, "Oh yeah, I've been to Ephesus."
Yeah, I know.
He's like, do you know?
I know the significance. But Priscilla and Aquila weren't there when we were there because this was some time later.
Oh dear.
So, and then what we also know is that Priscilla and Aquila plant a church in Corinth.
Yes.
And it's worth remembering that Corinth was a pretty debauched societal, powerful but very worldly.
Yeah.
Like all sorts going on in Corinth. And they plant a church right there. And they're awesome. I mean, Priscilla... And I think that's the interesting thing to note. First of all, is that they come as a package, don't they? Like in those 7 references that we read. So that as Amy said, we find them in Acts 18. If you want to look it up, Acts 18. There's mention of them 4 times. They get mentioned in Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Timothy. And obviously all of the epistle references, Romans, Corinthians and Timothy, are all written by Paul because they're really good friends, which is what we'll come on to.
Yeah. But they're never mentioned separately.
They're never mentioned separately. They come as a package, which is important, which we're going to come on to. And go on.
So the other things then we learn about Priscilla is firstly then that she was a teacher.
Yeah.
So if you've been listening to the podcast and you are in any doubt that women preach and teach, Priscilla was clearly a preacher. Like Rachel said, she had learned, couldn't get better than learning the gospel through the Apostle Paul. So she had sat under...
Well, Jesus might be slightly better.
Okay, sorry, yes. Okay, apart from Jesus. But sitting under his teaching, and she... preached, she taught, and we learn in a minute that also in one of the which one is in Acts where we learn that she actually then teaches Apollos, right? Who was a well-known teacher in that time, and she says that he's not teaching adequately because he doesn't know the resurrection and the life of Jesus and the Spirit and all of that. And so she then says, actually, can I help you out here and give you the full version of the teachings of Jesus? And he learns, and sure enough, all that good stuff, he then goes and preaches the gospel from then. But that is so clearly
a part of who she is.
Exactly.
A clear part of her calling.
The other interesting thing I was going to say is in the teaching part is that we learn. I don't know whether Paula Gooder mentioned this. Last time we were talking about Phoebe, but the importance of how names are mentioned in the scriptures. And so often, in fact, you never would hear a female being named before their husband. And here, obviously, Priscilla, most of the time, is it 3 out of the 4 times?
No, more than that.
4 out of...
It's 5 out of the 7 times.
5 out of the 7 that she has been...
It says...
Priscilla, then Aquila. And as we've been studying this and reading it, that is so significant.
Hugely significant.
It isn't just that they decided that it sounds better that way round.
Yeah.
It basically means that in the context of when they're using these names, which is often around teaching, Priscilla goes first, meaning that she's the stronger teacher of them all. That's her primary gifting within their relationship. Because actually, when they talk about the tent making or the aspect of the home or leading the church in the home, Aquila goes first.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting.
Well, and it cannot be underestimated how significant it is that Paul, I mean, this is Paul
says this,
chooses to put her name before Aquila's.
Yeah.
Which, again, it cannot be underestimated how countercultural that was in a society, in a time where women were not just sort of subconsciously or unconsciously considered less than men. It was overt, it was blatant, it was vocalized that women were seen as lesser than men, that their witness didn't count the same as men in a court of law, and that there was a very clear expectation about what a woman's role would be. And we've talked about this lots before, but it's so important that we keep hammering this home, that in a culture, in a society where women were deemed as lesser, inferior, mentally inferior in terms of their strength, in terms of their intellect, inferior on every level, we find that Paul, who is so often considered to be this sort of, like, I guess the poster boy of complementarianism or at his worst, sexism. Yeah. I'm not saying that complementarianism is the same as sexism, just to be really clear. But often he's seen in that light. Yeah. And actually, in his treatment or in the way he addresses Priscilla, it's so important that we understand that what Paul is saying is he is validating her call as a teacher. Yeah. He's validating her role in the church as a leader. He's validating her key contribution to the advancement of the gospel.
But what I like about it is controversial. It is controversial in this time to put her name forward. But it's also, it isn't like a sort of token.
No.
Let's chuck the woman in. What he's saying is this isn't based on gender in whatsoever.
Yes.
This is purely gifting, and this is what their contribution to the kingdom is, which I just love, because it's like I'm not even going to entertain the tokenism of it.
So good. That is so true. That he's just clearly what we also understand is that they become really good friends. We're going to come on to that a bit more, but clearly Paul, Priscilla and Aquila, the three of them, it's not like she's the tag along, it's not like they sit down and sort of have the real conversations. That's the impression that you get. The picture you get is not that Paul and Aquila are sort of doing the real deep stuff, and she's just, the domestic help, as it were. Yeah. The impression you get, she's there. She's in the conversation. Yeah. They're learning together. They're grappling together. They're in it together, the three of them, which is so powerful. Yeah. And again, so antithetical to so much of what we think about Paul, because there's those tricky passages which we're not going to go over again because we've done that before. Yeah. But Priscilla is amazing, basically, and the way that Paul names her first is absolutely key. So she's the other thing to mention is, of course, we said this, but she sat under Paul's teaching, but he's essentially raised, he's taught her, he's mentored her, and we were just saying, weren't we, as we're preparing, the importance of that. Yeah. That's something that we need to be constantly mindful of. Who are we? Yeah. Who are we raising up?
We'll go on to this in a minute, but just every time I read as in Acts, when you read the early church really going for it, they are so clear on their vision, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Of preaching the gospel and passing it on, that they can pass it on, And I just think, it is good. It's another, I guess, another challenge or another invitation to be aware of those that have a gift to proclaim the gospel, and raise those people up and bring them into the conversation. And even people who, in this day, like we're saying, Priscilla was like and out there because she was a female in this context. But who are some of the people that we dismiss because they're not culturally?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, this is something that I've chatted to. Well, we've talked about it, and I've chatted to other women who feel called to church leadership and teaching in a church context and preaching, etc. Is some of what has gone before. I'm talking about sort of in our day.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the Billy Graham rule. And this is not a criticism of Billy Graham whatsoever. And it's not even a criticism. I know some very godly, brilliant male church leaders who have kind of lived by the Billy Graham rule. And essentially the Billy Graham rule is basically Billy Graham would never be alone with a woman other than his wife, and he made a rule out of them to safeguard himself against potential temptation and obviously subsequent infidelity.
Yeah.
And on the surface, what an amazing commitment. You know, what a great discipline to have in place. You know, so he'd never ride in a car with a woman on his own, he'd never go for coffee, he'd never, etc., etc. And in some ways, well, in a lot of ways, I hugely respect Billy Graham for having that rule. And clearly he had a faithful, happy marriage. He was also somebody that was under huge amounts of scrutiny.
Yeah.
I imagine the enemy had a target on his back, quite frankly, because of all the amazing gospel fruit that came out of his ministry.
Yeah.
But it was something that clearly God had put on his life. Here's what this is the issue, is that other men, male leaders, have implemented that rule. And again, I'm not standing in judgment on those people, the godly men that I know well who have done that. The problem is, how do you pass it on? How do you pass it on? If, because this is the conundrum, if like the vast majority of church leaders and preachers and teachers are men, and they only pass it on to other men because, you know, they'll have coffee or travel in the car or go to places, because mentoring often happens just on the go, doesn't it? Then we have a problem. Yeah. And so there has to be a way for male leaders, male teachers to pass on, to mentor. What we're seeing happen here with Paul and Priscilla, he passes it on, and it's done round the table. I imagine them making their tents, and, you know, he's passing it on. And you could argue, well, Aquila's there the whole time. Yeah, maybe. But what about then unmarried women who are called to church leadership and to teaching? Phoebe, for example. There's got to be a way around that. There's got to be a way. And I think this is the problem, isn't it? If we're so terrified of men and women interacting in a way that is mutual, in a way that is platonic, if we're so worried the whole time about temptation, we've got a problem. Yeah. And I'm so grateful. I can think of people in my life, my brother Pete, Nick, who I work with, others, you know, who I have the benefit of working with, gleaning wisdom from them, and it's purely platonic. And of course, you have to be wise about settings and all of that. But there has to be a way for men and women to share and to learn from one another in a way that doesn't put people in temptation's way.
Yeah, for the sake of.
For the sake of the gospel, for the sake of raising up women, actually.
Yeah. No, it's really good. I think that's a really good point. The other thing is, even when we're thinking about Priscilla, is I do love, I know I mentioned it a minute ago, but I do love even Apollo's humility to learn from Priscilla, that she obviously says to him that you're not accurate, and he learns from her. Yeah. Firstly, that's like, obviously it's Aquila and Priscilla doing that together, Priscilla and Aquila doing that together, but that is bold, right? Yeah, because he's a well-known teacher. And it sounds like he's got a good grasp. Yeah, and it says that, doesn't it? Yeah, he's an intelligent man. Very learned. Yeah. But it just makes me think that actually, one, are we remaining teachable as we are preachers and teachers? Are we remaining open to correction and actually continuing to learn? Because when does learning ever end? And also, are we, I don't know, bold to say, oh, actually, have you thought about X, Y, Z to other people? I hope you'd say that to me.
I would, Amy, but you're pretty close to perfect. So I think we're okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that's true. I think that's really important.
Going back to your thing, though, do you think there is an answer to raising up,
investing in people from the opposite sex? I do. I think there has to be
mutual ground or something.
Because, like I said, I can think of maybe 4 guys in my life who are married. Actually, no, one of whom isn't married. And the last thing I would want to do, is put myself or put anyone else from the opposite sex in a situation where there's going to be any hint of, anything dodgy or et cetera, but also outside. We're talking because our context is the church, but outside of the church, that must happen all the time. Men and women working alongside each other, training each other, learning, raising each other up. And also extramarital affairs happen all the time in work that sort of stem from work context. So the last thing we must do is ignore the potential for temptation and ultimately unfaithfulness, sin, etc. So I'm not suggesting that. But there's the sort of the throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is actually men and women should never be in a situation where they're one-on-one, so for example, I may then choose to have coffee with somebody. It's in my diary. So it's very obvious. There's no secrecy, but I would happily have a coffee with a guy in a very public space, and my assistant, my husband would all know that it's happening.
Yeah.
I would feel absolutely fine to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, would you not?
I was just thinking, I don't think I've ever done that.
Haven't you?
I don't think so. Unless just a complete, just me and another guy in a coffee, going for a drink or a coffee.
But like as a work meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. See, the one thing I wouldn't do is go on a long car journey on my own. So I do think there needs to be boundaries in place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, nothing to worry about.
But I would definitely have meetings with a guy.
But it just wouldn't be in a coffee. I was
more thinking, actually, honestly, because I know that you have colleagues that you would oversee and you would
like that. I line manage
and
guys.
The same here. I'm more thinking of what we're saying about Paul, the sort of the gleaning.
Yeah, the sort of the mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I've never have done that.
Yeah.
I have learned obviously from many men.
Yeah.
But it would be in a larger context, or with Johnny there or something.
Yes. Like I said, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be wise.
I'm just
having a moment. Oh, I feel like we might have gone stuck down a rabbit hole, but that might be helpful because I think lots of women are working in context where
working it out.
Yeah, and maybe and probably the takeaway is for some it's like, ooh, just be careful.
Yeah.
Like,
yes, that's right. Character.
Are you actually flirting with potential disaster in terms of developing even an emotional, before it gets physical, even an emotional relationship with a male colleague or, whatever, that you just need to be careful of. And there might be somebody listening that's like, oh, crap, that's me. I need to... And actually, you do need to then put those harsh boundaries in place. Yeah. Like I said, I wouldn't go on a long car journey just me and another guy. Yeah. I just wouldn't do that. Because there is something intimate about the car. I get that creates sort of a sense of closeness. But on the other hand, I think there are lots and lots of women that have missed out on mentoring opportunities because
they just haven't been welcomed in.
They haven't been. There hasn't been.
And there are ways that you can do that.
There are ways to do it. We have to be intentional about
Paul
doing it.
Paul did it with somehow.
Paul did it with Priscilla.
Yeah, and others.
And others, Phoebe, etc. So, well, let's climb out of that little rabbit hole. And
it was good. But moving on.
Moving on
to the fact that also we know that their team They're team
so
players.
she was a teacher, number one, and number two.
They work together. So
She's
it's
a team player.
an example in the New Testament of male and female co-laboring, ministering together, married couple. When obviously context-wise, I think many will know, but both Rachel and I lead with our husbands, and maybe we can share a little bit about that. But this is the example in the scriptures of where this works really effectively. Again, there's no tokenism here. They're both have very key strengths they're obviously both great teachers, but they complement one another. They open their home together. They risk their lives together. They build friendship together. They extend the kingdom together. It's a really powerful example, actually, especially to you and I.
It is. It is. I love Priscilla and Aquila for that reason. That actually, Tim and I don't know about you guys, but Tim and I knew that we were called to lead together, I'd say several years before we actually did it. And interestingly, before we sort of started Gas Street, we had, I'd say, a couple of years of conversations around discerning, are we called to lead together, or is one of us called? Are we called to lead in separate contexts? Because there are lots of ways to do this. It could be that both of you are called to lead, but you're both called to, maybe one in church, one in the workplace, one in the home, one in the workplace. There's so many different ways. It could be that one of you is called to church leadership or civic leadership, and the other is called to be a supporting role. And we see examples of that as well. But Tim and I took a while discerning that actually, no, we were both called, much like Priscilla and Aquila, to lead the church together. That actually that was going to be best for us, best for the church, best for our family. And it's been a journey of figuring that out. I could do a little plug for At Home with the Hugheses.
Absolutely. You get so many compliments about that, don't you, Rach?
Oh, Amy. Amy. Have I said that to you?
Are you going to do any
Have
more?
I said that to you?
I've been reading your emails.
Oh, cheeky. No, so Tim and I have done this podcast together called At Home with Hughes. It's a terrible name, but it's the best that we can come up with. All about leading together. Because we get, I don't know about you guys, but we get so many people asking us, how do you do it? And I think just on that, so much of it is worked out in the practical. And I love how she is involved in the tent making. That's what I think is really profound. We don't know if they've got children, but it's not like he does the tent making and she does the church leadership. And for Tim and I, it's not like I do the church leadership and Tim runs the family, or vice versa. For us, the way we do it, we're all in all of it. We both lead the church, but we both lead the family. We're involved in, it's much better for my children that I do the cooking. It's also much better for our family that Tim does the finances. So, we have specialties within it, but we're all in all of it. And I think that's what I see with Priscilla and Aquila. They're interchangeable. They're so tightly a team. And I love that, and that's certainly the call that's on Tim and I.
I love that Paul's clearly in the mix of that team.
I know.
There's an openness in their relationship.
That too.
But it is interesting what you say about being called, though, because I don't know about you, but I do have people that say to me, really good, solid marriages, who are like, I could never in a million years work with my spouse. Like you and Johnny do. And so there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
If the idea horrifies you, it doesn't mean that you've got a terrible marriage in any way. I think there is a gift combination within ministry, I think, that works. And certainly for Johnny and I, we also just started to do it. And he grew and I grew, and everyone benefited much more from both of our gift mix coming together. And really enjoyed it. Like really flourished working with him. It didn't frustrate us in any way. Obviously, there are bumps in the road as you go. But one thing I would say just is we have never met these folks, so I love that we sort of paint these pictures of personality.
Priscilla's my best mate,
But there just must be a level of great humility with Aquila, in the sense of the time period.
Yeah.
He could have so easily
been insecure
or diminished what she carries, but
true.
clearly he's also he's with Paul in this. Like, it's like, no, she's gifted it. Let's release her. As much as me or you know what I mean? And so I think part of it, should we just do a big up to our husbands?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I feel so blessed to have met a husband who is amazing, who just is humble enough to not need to lead all the time. Secure enough, sure.
Or kingdom-minded enough to say, Amy has this...
Carries this
contribution to the kingdom. Who am I to stand in the way?
Yeah.
Like, I want to fan it into flame. That's what I see.
Because I think when Johnny and I first started leading together, he was much more confident than I was. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely needed to grow. And what was interesting...
I was confident. I just wasn't very good.
I don't.
Go on, sorry.
But what was interesting, and I really value this about Johnny, I don't always in the moment, but he saw in me more than I saw for myself. And there would be moments where we would lead, because we planted the church here 7 years ago. And there'd be moments where he would give me the microphone to go lead a meeting or lead a moment or whatever, and disappear. He would go to the back of the room, and there was no way I could get out of it. Even though I was absolutely petrified, he was like, over to you, I haven't got nothing.
You've got this.
He's like, I don't have anything. There you go. And then I'll be like, what? But it was in those moments that I grew. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, whether you're a church leader, whether you're anything leader, if you see more in your spouse or more in somebody near you than you do yourself, don't worry about chucking them in the deep end.
No.
Because you grow in the deep end.
Yeah.
Because so often we want to rescue the ones we love, don't we?
Yeah.
When actually it forms them.
Well, Tim won't mind me saying this, but I had the opposite experience. No, not quite the opposite experience. I've definitely talked to you about this, and Tim will not mind me saying this. But in the early days of us leading together, we would say, you do this, you do that, and then he'd say the bit that I was supposed to say, and I'd be like, what? And then he'd look at me like, well, I just kind of got carried away. And I'm like, you've left me with nothing to say. That was my bit. And because I was still quite new, it was like,
you needed your bit.
I need my bit. What am I going to do? And then after, it's like, you nicked my bit. And he's like, well, I just felt like I was in the moment. I'm like, I don't care if you were in the moment. You nicked my bit. But then the other thing is, he would, if I was then up there on my own, he'd be sitting up in the front row, and he would look at me. He'd have this look on his face, and afterwards, like, do you know what you... He'd be like scowling at me. And in basically, his face would be expressing what he was internalizing, which was, don't screw this up. Oh, gosh, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. What's she going to say next? Oh, no, what's she going to do now? And it's not, that sounds harsher than it actually is. What he's actually feeling is, I don't want her to sort of feel awful afterwards.
Yes.
I don't want her to, like, trip up.
Totally.
And then, like, almost it was like a form of protection.
Yeah.
But in reality, all I could see was my husband on the front row scowling and cringing at everything that I said. And so, to be honest, for me, the best way for me to grow, and I've said this before, but I would have to rotor myself on without Tim.
Yeah.
I'd be like, do you know what?
Yeah.
Yes, there are loads of times where Tim and I lead side by side, like literally side by side. But actually, sometimes it's better for us. Especially from when I was growing. It's like, do you know what? You stay at home.
Yeah.
I just need to go and lead without you staring at me on the front row. And I've said this to a friend of ours. Just rotor yourself on.
Yeah.
Leave husband at home to put the kids into bed. You just do it. And I think for some women there's such a second guessing, such a lack of confidence, who maybe are not married to guys that are going to be like, you go for it, you've got this. That actually you have to say, I just need to do this on my own.
I think that's so good, because you are absolutely brilliant. So I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that. But to hear you, no, it's like, no, I know I carry something, and I want to I want to exercise this for the sake of the kingdom.
Or I need to fail a few times.
Yeah, and actually I think it's brilliant that you would give people permission, even as you're speaking, to that isn't pride, to give yourself a go.
Well, and this is it, because I think, again, a lot of women, they think that they're being ambitious or prideful.
Yeah.
It's like,
no,
if you know God's called you,
totally.
I mean, then there's a line, isn't there? And I think the Spirit helps us discern that. But you've also got to, you've got to just have a go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how are you ever going to grow, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that she's a teacher. She's a team player, that Priscilla and Aquila. But actually, I love what you said, that they're a team player. They're a married couple that minister together, but they bring Paul right into, or rather, Paul
goes right in.
Right, and I think that says a lot about their marriage as well. That actually, yes, of course, as married couples, we need to create space where it's just us.
Yeah.
But we cannot make an idol out of marriage.
Yeah.
That actually marriages should always be a blessing to others. Yeah. And we need to be really mindful about who we're inviting into our marriage in a good way rather than in a bad way. And they model this, don't they? I mean, it's
to work
it's
together, to preach together, to travel together,
to live together even.
Yeah, it's a really, really wonderful example of what marriage should look like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And funny, we've always had people live with us. Yeah. And I'm just like, heart on sleeve, I'm like a life on sleeve kind of a person. Yeah. And so when people live with us, Tim and I do not kind of stifle, like, talk about this later, because we're worried that that our housemate is going to hear. Yeah. Like, no, we're just going to live it out. I'm not going to pretend that we don't fall out or that we don't annoy each other or... Do you know what I mean? We're going to, and actually the various different people that have lived with us have often commented on that actually they got to see our marriage just being played out. Yeah. And that's really healthy. That very good. Actually, if we want, again, it's like mentoring, isn't it? We've got to show people what healthy marriage looks like, not the kind of Sunday polished version.
Yeah, very good.
But we've got to show them what it looks like when you annoy each other or when you've got bad breath or, you've got flu and, do you know what I mean? It's like, what does marriage look like then? Yeah,
I think that's good. And I'm moving on to even that they're
you're right.
church leader is the hospitality.
Yes, sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
No, but
you're
obviously
right.
churches were led in homes at this point. So the radical hospitality is one that they invited, they invited their people into their home to church, to lead a church, but also they invited Paul into their marriage. But I guess I'm agreeing with you, is that the ultimate sign of radical generosity is letting people into the real. I think that is the greatest form of hospitality.
This is perfect timing, actually, because our friend Tanya has just appeared at the window with a little baby girl. And we missed you last episode. Yes. I was interviewing the fabulous Daryl Johnson because you were otherwise engaged and you still are. Why don't you, because this is what you're doing, what we've done in terms of our family with adoption and fostering. This is radical hospitality.
Yeah, so I was sad to miss Daryl.
We did miss you.
But we've taken a little babber into our home to foster and hope to adopt.
She is a bit gorgeous.
She is gorgeous.
I've fallen in love.
Yeah,
100%.
She is very, very special. So more of that to come.
More of that to come. But she's only 3 months old, so a little bit of juggling.
Yes,
you're a bit tired today, aren't you?
I am a little bit tired. Yes, and she certainly has come into the real. She doesn't know it yet.
yes. I like that, the real.
Yeah,
but that's it. You're right. Radical hospitality is inviting people right into the very centre of our lives.
And I think I would struggle more than you. We have a couple in our church who are so generous with their hospitality, opening their home. So many people have a key to their house.
I love that.
And I get to a point where I'm like, okay, now can you all leave?
Yes.
Whereas you don't really have that, do you?
I definitely have that moment, but I think, and again, maybe it's a personality type.
Yeah.
I remember hearing somebody, I forget who it was, some podcast where somebody said the key is being able to say, okay, time to go now.
Yeah.
And I think
there's a freedom in that.
I think I've got much better at saying, look, you guys carry on. I just need to go and have,
Yeah.
I need to go to bed,
Yeah.
or I need some time by myself, or
Yeah.
I think I've just got a lot better at being fairly direct and
Yeah.
honest about,
Yeah.
you know, or even like when we've had people live with us, it's like, could you make yourself scarce today,
Yeah.
or not? We'd give notice,
Yeah.
because Tim and I just want the house to ourselves,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
I think that if you can be upfront, it's much easier, isn't it?
But even so, going to the fact that they were church leaders,
Yes,
they
that's the
obviously-
third thing, isn't
yeah,
it?
because
Yeah.
they opened their home to lead a church within their home. I don't know about you, but I don't know whether it was within COVID or something, but I feel like it's become harder for people to
Yeah.
gather in their homes, and even you get used to, don't you, like people not coming into your home during that time. And actually, again, reading this is the challenge of there's a cost to, I imagine there was a real
Absolutely.
cost for people to lead a church in your home.
Yeah.
And we don't know how often, what that would have meant, like
No.
how many hours, for how long, how often, all of that.
Or what their home was like,
Yeah.
you know, was it big, was it small?
But I do
you
wonder,
know.
I guess what I'm saying is I think there's a challenge to us to open our home again.
I agree.
Get people in.
And it's confronting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when I think about and I think generally we're both actually, the way that we've been raised, our parents were really good at opening their home, our home.
They were.
I think we're probably on that, we lean towards open home.
Yeah.
You know, we've often got people over, people staying, you know. But I know when I feel resistant to it, it's usually pushing a button, and often for me it's around control.
Yeah.
If I feel out of control,
Yeah, totally.
I feel like I don't want people invading, or even if you just got a bit tired and jaded.
Yeah.
I know, again, for me, I can get a bit resentful.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's all take, you know, when does anyone invite me to their house? Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I'm always cooking.
It's always me, you know, and even the whole house proud thing. Like, we
Yes.
have a lot of kids.
Yes.
I'm not
For me, it's when one of the kids kick off.
Oh, yes.
And you're like, I hate that this is on display.
Yes.
You know, all of that, especially when they're toddlers.
Yes, but it's real life.
It's
isn't
real life,
it?
and people do appreciate
And
it.
actually, our house looks like a pigsty
Yeah.
a lot of the time. And I can't pretend it doesn't.
Yeah.
And actually, I think to get to a place where you're happy for people to come into your house.
Very freeing.
And it's messy, and maybe there's no food in the fridge. And that, it sounds so trivial, but it's actually, I think
Yeah.
it's really reflective of your own,
Yeah.
where your values are,
Yeah.
isn't it? Or where your
Yeah.
priorities are.
Yeah, I do. I do have people who come into the house and just start to help themselves.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Do
what
everything,
same.
and I'm like, I don't even know where things are put
Yeah.
back in my house.
Yes.
So there is a level of like, do you know what? Let it go.
Let it go.
This is
It's
actually
control.
this is serving them. It's like
Yes.
blessing them to find a place of home for them.
The other side, though, is I can think of a really good friend of mine. My friend Anna is amazing.
Yes, entertainment.
But like, as in, I wasn't going to say entertainment. It makes it sound like she tap dances on the kitchen
But
counter.
someone
or
said there's a
something.
difference between entertainment and hospitality.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like that there is something, I think it's entertainment I think it's entertainment where someone is gifted at spoiling you.
Yes, and that's what she's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yes.
when we go round to their house, she's got, it looks beautiful.
Yes.
There's fresh flowers,
Yes.
there's candles on
And
the
you're
table.
really blessed by
and
that.
she's like got my favourite foods
Yes,
in. There's
totally.
always chocolate. And so I can think of, like, there was a time, I remember, it was not long after little Summer had joined our family. It was just after lockdown. I was absolutely exhausted. It was on my birthday. It was actually my birthday yesterday. So it was like a couple of years ago on my birthday. And we'd gone down to visit these friends. And they just scooped us up. And they've got this beautiful home. And we sat on their sofa. And they've got this gorgeous, comfy sofa. And we ate chocolate.
Yeah.
And we sipped, very low alcohol wine, I'm sure. Only one glass, just to be clear. And I just remember feeling so loved.
Yeah.
And I don't I'm really good at like hearty food,
Yes.
but I'm rubbish at making somewhere look really, I mean, Tim's actually much better at ambience. But my point is,
Yeah, there's both.
there's both.
Yes, totally.
There's both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, we've gone down another little rabbit hole there. We should.
Yeah.
My computer's now
What
locked.
do we
You're going to have to
learn
carry
about
on.
Jesus through these scriptures? I think basically we've written here that Paul is leading in the footsteps of Jesus.
Yeah.
And we say this all the time, but it's worth saying again, that Jesus was such good news to women. You know, such good. He completely turned the tables when it came to releasing women, to allow women in to learn from him, to become his disciples. You know, his teachings on divorce and marriage. I mean, this is such good news for women in this time, and continue to be so. And what we see obviously is that Paul is continuing to lead in Jesus' footsteps. We've kind of mentioned already, but just continuing to release women into their rightful place.
Yeah, building on it. And that's why, and this is what Paula was so good last time, saying, let us not swallow the lie that Paul is this sort of sexist, misogynist, woman-hating. Yeah. It's just based on a couple of verses that that actually are contextual, that are not sort of general teaching around the role and place of women. Yeah. Actually, Paul's building on Jesus' example. Yeah. He was releasing women. He was entrusting women. And as you said right at the beginning, not like to sort of, do the right thing, because he's like, here's a disciple. Exactly. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, nor male nor female. Yes. Here's a disciple who has a call on their lives. Yeah. Let's release them. Phoebe, Priscilla, Lydia, the list goes on. So, yes.
Can I just give a little plug?
Yeah,
because
please.
I was saying to you that I listened the other day to Bridgetown,
which is a church in America.
Tyler
Staton.
Yeah, Tyler Staton in Bridgetown. He did the most wonderful teaching on why, it was actually called Why Women Should Be Elders. But the teaching is vast and it covers so much ground, and you can find it on their website or find it on YouTube. And so if you're even thinking around some of those difficult, more tricky passages, or some of the teachings of Paul, go listen. It's so good.
Maybe we can put a link up somewhere.
Yeah,
if we're clever enough to do that somehow. So what do we learn? We've said, what do we learn about Jesus? That basically, he set the example. And then what does that mean for us now? And in some ways we sort of covered this, but I think for me, I've always had this deep conviction or growing conviction that men and women are designed to work together. And we see this in the garden. We go right back to Genesis, and we've touched on this so many times. The blueprint is not women's subordination to men. That was an outcome of the fall. The blueprint was men and women ministering, working, mutual submission, mutual labouring. Yeah. Although labouring can't, but anyway, will there be labouring in the garden? Ultimately, anyway.
They're in the image of God. They reflect God together.
Equally, exactly. Yes. And then when it comes to now, life in the 21st century, we so love to swing, don't we? And so some of the sort of the militant feminist movement is all around crushing, diminishing men. Yeah. To sort of almost like, we got to address the balance, women, women run the world, rule the world, And my goodness, there's a lot of the feminist movement that I think is really important. There is a balance to be redressed, but the blueprint, the dream is men and women working together, recognizing our different yet equal contribution. And when I say different and equal, I'm not talking about men have this role and women have this role. I'm talking about recognizing that when it comes to femininity and masculinity, there is a broad spectrum, and that men and women are called to bring whatever unique gifts have been placed in them as men and women, as individuals, together. Yeah. And that there's something incredibly special when that happens. Yeah, yeah. And I think that is one of the key things, isn't it? Learning from this particular text or these particular people. But also, I think one of the things that I think I always read into this stuff and feel really challenged by is their sacrificial
lives. I mean, apparently they were both martyred together.
Well, Paul says in one of the verses...
Well, yes, you risked your life for me.
For me, yeah.
And they were obviously thrown out of Rome. I mean, their lives were tough, right? This is a costly life. And I'm always reading this stuff. I'm always like, flip.
Yeah, am I even a Christian?
Am I living for heaven? Am I living for eternity? Am I living for the proclamation of the gospel only? Am I living for Jesus only?
Yeah.
And so I think the way that they live, yes, how they do it is a good thing to look at. But also you look at their lives.
Yeah.
And this was a life given over to the service of others.
And I think we've touched it, but the whole open home thing is something that it is like something that we can apply to our own context. Even like I was struck when Priscilla and Aquila want to challenge Apollos, that it says they invite him into their home to have that conversation. It's not over email. I know email wasn't.
Yeah, there's an intimacy to that. It's good.
It's like, come and have dinner with us. Yeah. Let's chat about this. It's highly relational.
Yeah, it's good.
And actually, I think it might have been John Mark Comer said, we've traded connectivity, or like the illusion of connectivity, for the reality of community. And of course they didn't have digital connectivity at that time, and I think we have to be mindful of that their relationship, that everything was so highly relational in those early days, and we got to fight for that at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to land maybe what I've already said, but just this razor sharp vision. I mean, we're both church leaders, and I sometimes think these guys are church leaders, right?
Yes.
And their aim was to teach the gospel, to get the gospel into the guts of the people that they lead, to then go and proclaim the gospel. And I sometimes think, I think we've made it a little bit more complicated.
Yes, I know.
And so even reading again, like the early church, it's like, they're so razor sharp. It's like, this is what you need to do. This is the gospel. Go where you feel led to go,
and
get it
give
out
up your life to do it.
Exactly.
Give up your comfort.
Yeah, exactly.
Give up your reputation.
Yeah, I mean, like we said,
give
Priscilla,
up your home.
Well, Priscilla, like you said, came from a wealthy background to become tent maker. Who knows the story there?
Absolutely.
What she had to give up for that,
and for a lot of them, give up your lives.
Yeah,
it's really, really challenging. And on that note. We'll wrap up. Shall we pray? Yeah. Do you want to pray?
Yeah. Well, Jesus, we just thank you that all truth comes from you. And we just pray over this conversation that anything that's not of you would just fall to the ground. And we ask that what's of you now would just stick in people's hearts and minds as they listen to this. And we just thank you for your gospel. We thank you for what you have done for us. And we ask now that you would give us, as your disciples, Lord, give us fresh vision to proclaim your gospel. You say the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. And we say, put us to work, Lord. Show us what it looks like to be your hands and feet to proclaim the good news in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks so much for joining us. And don't forget to book your tickets for the conference if you haven't yet. We're in Birmingham on the 5th of October and we're in London on the 12th of October. And we will see you soon.